Welcome to Toasting the Classics, a podcast where we take something that people call a classic and we talk about it and decide if it still deserves to be a classic. I'm leaving out the drinking part because this is Sober Shorts. It's going to be short. I don't know 100% how sober we're going to be because I still have some of that Green Spot whiskey left over from the last episode that we did. Bill, how are you doing?
I may have poured a little bit of that same green spot.
Yeah, it's the likes of me and Bill don't usually get to taste such expensive, tasty whiskey. I don't know. I guess it wasn't that bad, was it? But still.
Uh, it's mid-range, I
We
would, I
didn't
would,
buy the actual
I'm guessing.
Middletons that was $300. So what are we doing today?
We are doing Walden by Mr. as you coined HDT or I don't know,
HDT, yeah.
Mr. Henry David Thoreau,
I bought an HD TV
transcendentalist.
one time and I was really disappointed because I thought it was just going to be a really clear picture, but it was just all channels about Henry David Thoreau. No,
That would
that
be
would,
interesting
I mean, I'd watch it
in
a
a
little bit.
way.
I'd watch it a little bit, I guess, but or it was just the pond, just a camera on the pond showing it
On Walden,
long. No, so this is not called On Walden Pond. It's not called, in my head, I thought it was called something more. It's just called Walden.
just
Eight-
Walden. Yeah.
1854, essentially diary work by Henry David Thoreau about the time that he spent living at Walden Pond, which, for anybody who doesn't know, I looked this up. It's really not that far from Boston.
No, or Concord. It's actually
It's
so he was
it's
a
very
he was a
close to Concord, but I realized when I saw Concord, Lexington, and Concord right next door, I was like, well, the British marched from Boston to Lexington and Concord on that day when the Revolutionary War started. So it's not very far. I think it's 10 or 15 miles or something like that.
I was shocked at actually like driving in a car
Uh-huh.
how quickly I got there when I lived in Boston
Oh,
and
okay.
went out to this area. I drove by Walden. I didn't actually get myself into the pond itself. It
hmm
seemed like it was I think it was a park of some sort, and so there
It
was
is some kind of park, yeah. I'm definitely thinking about driving up there because not only is it Walden, but also there's Minuteman National Historic Park, which is for Lexington
Mhm.
and Concord as well. So you could kind of make a day or maybe even more than one day of seeing those two things right next to each other. So
Mhm.
that's
Mhm.
definitely an idea that has been planted in my brain because, since I've lived in New York, I've been up to Boston a couple of times. So had you read this one before?
I had read it back in college.
Okay.
So it had been about probably 20 years.
I think I read some excerpts when I was in college, but I never read the whole thing. And I have to be honest, I kind of get him mixed up with Emerson. When I think of Thoreau, I think of Emerson, and it's difficult for me to remember which one is which. I have to think Thoreau's the guy that was at the pond.
Mhm.
Emerson, I don't even really know
Well, it was
what
Emerson's
I've read.
Pond. To
Was
be
it?
fair, it
Oh,
was. Yeah, so Thoreau actually built this cabin that he stayed at for over a period of 2 years, off and on, which was interesting. I thought but he basically built this on Emerson's land, and Emerson and he were good pals,
I did not
and
know that.
yep, in fact, was invited over multiple times. In fact, when he ended, so it was September of 1847, September 6th to be exact,
Oh, we're not too
1847,
far off, actually.
actually, what got my interest is I found there was this article I was telling you about off air about this guy who's been portraying Thoreau as actor
Like a
or
reenactor, like sort of a
like a
so-called
reenactor.
reenactor.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, and he'd been doing it for like 26 years, and he decided finally this year. But since '99, he's been doing this, and he decided to end his uh, his reign as Henry David Thoreau after 26 years, and decided to end it the day that Thoreau left. So
Okay. Okay. Yeah. All
yeah.
right. That makes sense. So, yeah, Thoreau was there from 1845 to 1847.
hmm
I don't know what date he arrived, but basically he's there for 2 years. Yeah, when you told me that about the guy quitting that job and I worked there for 26 years, my definite first thought was, well, that's one way to live your life, I guess. Like every single day being at Walden Pond and pretending to be Henry David. Maybe the guy was allowed to go on vacation or something. I don't think it
I mean,
was.
I think he lived locally, and I think it was more just a job that he was going and he was doing this portrayal job. It
Oh,
wasn't
so
like
he
he was
didn't
living
like
in the
live in
cabin.
the he didn't like live in the cabin and hang
Yeah,
out with three chairs and talk to every person that came into the cabin and stuff. Okay. So
yeah.
that makes it a little less of a burden for him to do that. So I thought this was a good one to do. I don't remember. We talked about doing this a long time ago and you were more on the gun than me. You read it a while back and then I listened to this actually while I was on my road trip across the country. So we've been kind of not getting to this for a while, but I was thinking it was a good idea for us to do because we've talked about we do nature writing a lot of the time. We've done I don't know, 4 or 5 different books, some of which like the guy in Into the Wild is clearly inspired by Thoreau. I think he had a copy of Walden, if I remember right. I know he had
That's right.
Tolstoy, and Tolstoy was directly influenced by Thoreau. Sorry, I'm saying it wrong. This was part of my biggest surprise. His name is pronounced thorough, like the
Hmm.
word thorough. That was like
Thorough.
the first thing that I read when I looked up stuff about about HDT was that that's where we all pronounce his name wrong. I've been saying it that way my whole life. I don't know. I don't know how it could be thorough, but that's what I read. So anyway, I'm just going to avoid saying his name. I'm going to say HDT because it drives me crazy to say thorough. That doesn't sound right. That sounds like a word, but this is sort of the beginning of nature writing, and I'm pretty sure that I don't. Would this be so? I read somewhere that some people say this is the first piece of American nature writing, and that can't be right. There must have been people writing about nature before this.
I mean, to some degree, there weren't a whole lot, there weren't a large number of American writers yet. I mean, you had Emerson
That's
who had been
true.
writing, right? And the first American novelist would be James Fenimore Cooper from
I was going to ask
Cooperstown, New
about
York.
Cooper. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, and I mean, I'm trying to think, recall the year that I think those were kind of
I
as, or
actually don't
they
know
were,
off the top of my head. If I had to guess, I would say 1830s because it's kind of when
yeah.
novels became big, but I really don't know. And I was
Mm-hmm.
thinking about that as being, but that isn't really nature writing per se. Although something we've covered a lot in talking about these books is the sort of romanticization of Native Americans. And that's
Hmm.
obviously a big part of Cooper's work. I actually
Right.
haven't read it. I've just seen the movie. I've been meaning to read that my whole life, but I definitely got the
It's
impression that there's some noble savage kind of thinking going on there, but maybe a
very
little
much
more.
so.
Maybe I should actually read it before I have an opinion about what he was saying. But I was thinking of Audubon, I think would have been before
Hmm.
this, but he mostly painted, but I think he also did extensive journals and things like that. There's probably somebody that comes before this. This is a big genre that he sort of created with doing that. And also some of his work was really influential on people like Gandhi and oh, Muir. Yeah, definitely Muir. Yeah. Muir, I think is a lot like Thoreau. I mean, he's definitely in the same ilk, sort of not
The
too long after
Transcendentalist
him.
Society, right? I think we talked about the Transcendentalist Society when we were talking about Humboldt.
Really, I don't remember talking about that at all, but okay, yeah, that makes
Yeah,
sense. I think he
yeah.
got into that also because that's
Hmm.
Emerson, right? Emerson is the
It's
transcendentalist.
both. It's both.
Okay.
Thoreau as well. Yeah, definitely.
Okay.
With Emerson, I think Emerson was kind of a mentor to Thoreau, and then from there it kind of expanded out into others, into other writers and naturalists of the time, people who really were kind of arguing of the importance of harmony, getting back to the land, living with the land,
Yeah.
and having that be their main focus.
I
You
thought a
know.
lot about sort of the idea of like the wandering mystic or the hermit or something like that,
Mm.
and how there's this long tradition of that. And I was trying to think about whether so first of all, one of the things that really surprised me about this is he's really not that isolated. Like we talked about,
No, he's not.
he's a day's walk from Boston, which is one of the biggest cities in America at the time. And
Hmm.
he's going into Concord on a regular basis. He's getting
Hmm.
supplies from there. There's people coming into the cottage and stuff all the time. He's really not that isolated at all. Like
No.
if he was sick or something, he could walk to a town and be fine, like pretty quickly. I mean, he's not nowhere near as isolated as Chris McCandless was, even though it's sort of the same impulse that McCandless was dealing with. But this is maybe too deep of a question for for a short. But do you think this idea of going off into the wilderness is that a Christian thing, or did that exist before that? And does that exist in other cultures in the same way? I was thinking about like these Irish monks that went off to places like Iceland and stuff like that, like before anybody lived there, and people in the
Hmm.
desert, and this seems like a very similar thing. But then again, he's inspired by India a lot, and I guess there's probably an idea of sort of a wandering mystic in India too.
Hmm.
So maybe it isn't.
I think the idea of the kind of spiritual awakening had been around for countless generations, and the idea of isolating with oneself and trying to find oneself in the natural world isn't wasn't that uncommon for the time period and other people and another writing. And so I don't know that that's necessarily unique or a new idea that Thoreau
Where
is
did we
getting
talk
to.
about, but where did we talk about the idea that like Oh, I can't remember. I'm pretty sure we talked about this in one of the shows over the years where the idea that, like Thoreau could do this because civilization is so established by the time he's living that you're really
Hmm.
not in that much danger if you go live in the woods.
Hmm.
Like it's
Hmm.
not like there's banditry and things like we talked about this somewhere and I can't remember where. But like even in 1847, if he had gone and done this like in the Dakotas, he probably would have been killed. Like it wouldn't have been safe to be out there. But this is like you have to have a certain level of civilization to be able to do this kind of thing. Oh, I know where I talked about it.
Was it with London?
I talked about it when I was talking about the Romantic movement with the paintings of Caspar David Friedrich,
Mm.
the episode that I did by myself on that. I think I
Oh,
was
okay.
talking about
Okay.
some of that, how that was the first time in European history where you could actually go out to the wilderness and not be killed. So you could go hiking and things like that and enjoy the wilderness because really, historically, the wilderness is a pretty dangerous place. And not because of the wilderness, but because of the people you'd run into out there.
Hmm.
Like, have you ever read about like the Iceman, Otzi?
Oh, I know of it.
Yeah,
I don't know what
he was
specific
apparently
character.
wandering away from all other civilization, crossing the mountains,
Hmm.
and lo
Hmm.
and behold, a bunch of guys with arrows jumped him and shot him full of arrows and killed him. And it's like, yeah, that's what would have happened to you in like the Copper Age if you went wandering off by yourself. So anyway, it's a little bit of a digression. So what'd you think about this book?
Parts of it I appreciated. I think more of the reflective piece elements, where he's getting into these ideas of critiquing himself and his lifestyle and society as a whole. I think those were all ideas that I connect to and empathize with. He would occasionally go off on little tangents and wrote for a few pages too long, I feel like at times. Just
Yeah,
about.
there's a way of writing, and I suppose well this is the Victorian era, I suppose, if I was thinking about it. We don't think of it that way because it's in America, but there's a way of writing in this era that is just, hey, why use four words when you can use 64? And everything is
Mhm.
so oblique and so you talk around everything you're saying, and it can drive you cra It's a very beautiful way of writing in a lot of ways, but also as a modern American, I'm like, could you just get to the point?
Mhm.
you know and then
Mhm.
combined with these like these passages of prose that are very hard to read, he's got all this stuff like talking about how many nails he bought and how
Mhm.
much beans cost and things. You're like, well, wait a minute, make up your
Why are
mind.
we going here?
Yeah,
Yeah.
what are you doing? Are you writing like a beautiful work of literature, or is this like a trip to Home Depot? That's I
Yeah.
was thinking about, have you ever fantasized about this kind of thing, like doing this sort of thing?
Oh, sure.
Yeah,
Absolutely. I mean, when I went off and lived in a couple of the parks that we've talked about, it's kind of that back to the land. And even, growing up, I kind of was exposed to that early on with my family and I moving up to live in very northernmost California near in Trinity County and living on land where we were building a large home and living out of a trailer while it was being built and hauling
that sounded
water and
cool. Yeah, you told me about that. Like your grandparents lived up there or something, and like,
well, my mom had bought like 17 acres, right? And
wow,
outside of this little town called Hayfork, California, which in the late 70s, early 80s was just this it had been this logging town that was slowly going away because logging was losing a lot of money
hmm,
at that point in time. So, we bought 17 acres and we're building a cabin up there and we're living off of that. We're living through that at least,
that sounds awesome.
not necessarily like going out and fishing or hunting for food or
Did
even
your mom just get
necessarily
tired of that,
farming.
or what happened? That sounds so cool.
I mean, with time, yeah, I think so. And as she was going through college, she eventually became a nurse.
Hmm.
But was we were going back and forth and living there, and then living in Redding, California, where she was going to nursing school.
Okay.
And we would go back and forth between those places. And eventually, it became problematic just for to have access to be able to work and things like
Yeah.
that. So
Did you ever read the book My Side of the Mountain?
no, who's that
I
by?
loved it. We read that in school, maybe like fourth or fifth grade. It was about this
Mm.
kid. I actually can't remember where he lives, but it's I think the kid is influenced by Thoreau because he goes off and lives in the woods and he carves a hole in the bottom of a giant tree and he just like lives in the bottom of a tree and runs away from, the town and his family and stuff. And oh
Mm.
man, all the little boys in my class, we all read it. We were like, "Ooh,
Oh,
that's cool. Like that sounds really neat."
for
I was
me, it
very
was Where the
inspired.
Red Fern Grows, if you remember that one.
You mean, I was just talking to my daughter today about this. Like, why are there so many books that we have to read in school where dogs die? What are they trying to do to kids? Like, she was talking about this book, Stone Fox, that ends with the dog's heart exploding, is
Oh
what
my
happens.
gosh.
And I was like, what? That isn't even a thing. Like, why would they put that into a book? I used to watch Old Yeller and Where the Red Fern Grows. I read The Red Pony where the horse dies. Like, what were they trying to do to us? This is kind of interesting to situate in time, right? So it's like we said, 1845 to 1847. So this is one of the big issues that's going on is slavery in the country at the
Hmm.
time.
Hmm.
And I don't know, Thoreau's not dealing with it because he's up north, but he's got a lot of opinions about it. And
Went to jail.
I wasn't clear about whether he went to jail because of that or because of his resistance to the Mexican War. I've seen
It was a
both.
combination of both. So if
It's
you,
both things. Okay.
yeah. And so he published Civil Disobedience in 1849, but he was actually
Before this,
arrested
because this wasn't
before
published. This
That's
wasn't
right.
published till 1854. So yeah.
That's right. He was actually arrested in part because he was refusing to pay taxes, and that he was arrested in 1846. So he actually was visited by a tax collector and was actually and spent a night in jail in the middle of this. So right in the middle of in 1846, he goes to jail because he's refusing to pay his taxes in part in because he didn't want to support the war in Mexico, and B, because he had his views on slavery, which he was
Right.
anti-slavery.
The Mexican War is definitely one of the least justified wars that America's ever fought, but also one of the most profitable. I
Mm.
mean, we got all of the Western United States by fighting that war. So it's like, I don't know. I don't know what to do with that fact, but that's just, I guess the war itself wasn't all that immoral because I think the Mexicans and the Americans both wanted the war. We fought a war, but like we really drubbed them and took a big chunk of their country.
We did.
So taking all that seems a little, but then again, man, it's like California and everything west of the Mississippi almost. I mean, it's kind of a big deal. I don't know. I don't know where to be on that morally. I
I
could
think
see why he protested it.
it was very much a huge land grab, right? It
Hmm.
was very much we will march down to Mexico City and we will take what we want. I definitely see his perspective, and I think that it probably was unjust, but at the same time, here I live
Right,
in
right,
the Bay
exactly.
Area of California. So
Yeah. I mean, I think
uh,
the reality was probably that there were so few people living in what was the Western United States, like in the places that we took from Mexico, that on some level we were probably going to take it anyway over time, if you know what I mean. Like the way we sort of nibbled away at Spanish Florida and Alabama and Mississippi, I think we were probably going to end up taking. I don't think it really was because of the war, but still, that's a lot of territory to grab at one time. So.
it was.
And it led to the Civil War in a lot of ways. Yeah, that's a little aside on American history, I suppose. But that was, I think that was my biggest surprise about this was that civil disobedience and the being in jail for the Mexican War thing is in the middle of this. I didn't
Yeah,
realize that. I didn't realize that was like all at the same time. And then he didn't even live to see the end of the Civil War. He died in 1862.
that's right.
I didn't catch why, but
TB
I
is
was
what
gonna
is
say TB.
suspected.
I was gonna guess TB. That seems like that's what always gets people
Yeah,
in that time. But yeah, that sucks. A guy that like spent all his time living out in the wilderness and then he catches like sort of the city disease. You
right.
know, we still have that in New York sometimes. There's still people showing up with TB in hospitals. It's wild.
It's coming back, actually.
It's coming back, first of all, because people don't get treated, and but even when they do, there's sometimes resistant strains. It could be pretty scary stuff if people started getting that. That's
Yeah.
a bad disease to have.
I think what I most relate to with this is just this idea of living simply,
Oh
right?
yeah. Yeah, yeah. I think this is like a huge current in American life. Not necessarily the main thing. There's obviously the part of American life that's like the Wall Street tech bros kind of thing. But there's also this, right? There's also this other side to America, which is I think represented by kind of the way hipsters behave. Like
Hmm.
trying to do like old crafts and do things themselves and stuff like this. It's there's some dichotomy that we have in this country that's reflected in this, I think. Maybe created by this, but maybe not. Maybe it's something older, but
Well, and Thoreau, interestingly, and this was one of the things that I found most interesting, is that he not only was he like wanting to live and grow his own food and things like that, but he was actually saying, "Hey, we shouldn't even be eating meats." He ended up
yeah,
going
yeah.
vegetarian. He was actually opposed to liquor
Alcohol.
and
Oh,
out wine. Spoke to
terrible.
that, right? He said like
Terrible
the
opinion.
only thing that I know. I kind of disagree with him on in some ways on that.
Yeah.
As would hipsters, I think. or
I
a
think
lot of
so. Yeah,
them.
with all the
Yeah,
craft beer and stuff like that. Yeah,
right.
definitely. But I think one of the things that makes the book a little bit hard to talk about is that it's kind of just a diary of 2 years of this guy's life. And it's not
Right.
even really sequential. It's not like, this year I did this, and there's no narrative to
No.
sort of wrap your head around and have something to talk about and remember. So that's why I kind of switched this one from being a regular long episode to a short, because I think we're kind of just have a sensory impression of this book. I don't know how you feel, but I
Well,
definitely remember some images and some events that happen in it,
mhm.
but it just doesn't have the chronological or narrative focus to really be good to talk about for very long, I don't think. So,
I think that's right. And I think even some of what I've read in research on this is that he tried to consolidate the time that he spent there into a shorter period of time. I think because he was struggling with how to turn his journal writing into exactly that, right?
mhm.
So I think that was an interesting element of it. Might be one of my
The structure of the book is an interesting thing, right? One of the things I kind of wanted to talk about a little bit is I don't know why more people don't suggest to Americans and people in general, I think, but especially Americans, you don't have to participate in all the consumerism,
hmm,
right? Like you can
hmm,
just kind of opt out of it. You don't have to
hmm,
have the fanciest shoes. You don't have to have a brand new car. You can kind of live without these things, but almost no one resists that temptation.
hmm.
It's like for some reason everybody seems to feel like they just have to have the best things and I think it's why everybody works so darn hard in America. I think everybody's just constantly running around trying to pay for all this stuff that everyone tells them they're supposed to pay for. I definitely have a streak in me that's like, no, just reject those things. Like if someone tells you you have to buy something, don't buy it. You don't have to buy it. Just because we have a capitalist system and stuff, you don't actually have to participate. Nobody's putting a gun to your head. So I feel like this kind of thinking would be nice for more people.
I think that's a struggle because there is kind of a social pressure
Totally.
to keep up with the Joneses, right?
Right. Right.
To
Right.
to have the latest iPhone or to be able to access the internet at a or from your hand or
Right.
on a computer
I
and to
mean, I
be able
love
to
some things,
appreciate,
A
right?
smartphone's a thing you got to have. It's a great tool. It's a wonderful tool. Like
Do we have to have those things?
you don't have
I
to,
mean,
but
that was
I
kind of getting
think
at Thoreau's point, right?
I feel like the smartphone gives you what you pay for. I really do think it's so capable and so it's capable of doing so amazingly many things. Like you really don't need a whole lot of else in your life in a lot of ways if you think about it. You just really it really can do almost everything you need to have done in your life. I feel like people should just choose the things that they really want and not so much the things, keeping up with the Joneses. I don't know. I think that's why people, as he says, lead lives of quiet desperation because they're just trying to keep up with everybody. I look at what people buy and I'm always thinking to myself, I know they're in debt. There's no way these people can afford the thing. They have, like I'm doing okay in life, but I see people, everyone around me has more. And I'm like,
Hmm.
I know you just must be just putting it all on a credit card because I know
Hmm.
you're not making that much money. Something I think people could take a lesson from this guy from. Although, as people have complained about him, I think he actually came from quite a bit of money and had a lot of privilege to do the things that he was doing. So there's that side of it too. He could afford to reject making money and stuff because I think he had some from his family. My biggest surprise was the thing about civil disobedience taking place during this. How about you? Anything?
That's one. There's the proximity, right? The proximity
Yeah. 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 That
he
was up there
was
for me
at.
too.
And honestly, I don't know that I knew that he had gone vegetarian. So there's some aspects to
That doesn't
that.
surprise me because of the Asian influence, like all the Indian philosophy that was influencing him. So that's not, I don't think I knew that per se, but it does make sense.
And then as much time as he spent while he was living here and doing all these writings, spending a lot of time with the Emersons themselves.
I didn't know that until just now, until you told me that. I don't know how I missed that. But I guess the question is, are we going to vote for this? Does this deserve to be a classic?
Well, whose choice was this? Was this my choice or was this
No
your
idea.
choice?
No, I think we
Then
talked about doing it. We were just kind of coming up with a list of good nature writing and thinking of it. To me, I don't know if the question of whether this is a classic is a super fascinating question. I mean, this is a hugely influential book. I don't know if the writing itself is something that I would put in like the annals of great writing in history. It's okay. Like we said, the structure is a little, I feel like he could have made some better choices. There's a lot of listing of how much hardware and food supplies cost and things like that. It's a little bit like a bad game of D&D where you spend too much time like at figuring out how much your backpack weighs and stuff. Like it drags
Are
it
we
down.
encumbered? Were we? Was he
Yeah, are we
encumbered? Was he
encumbered? Yeah,
have?
yeah. I mean, I could fault it on that, but I mean, this is a hugely influential book, so I think I got to vote for it.
I hear that. I think this we're kind of getting into the realm of three body problem that we saw a little
Okay.
bit, but
You think the
but I
writing is this bad?
I mean maybe not quite that bad, but there was a little bit of the lists that I kind of
Yeah,
threw me off a little bit and
yeah.
going
Fair
off
enough.
on really long like too many pages on that
Yeah, but
on his
we know
lists.
now that it cost him exactly $28.12 to build his cabin. I mean, I feel like that's important. That seems cheap.
That's pretty inexpensive by today's
That's pretty
costs.
inexpensive considering I went to a happy hour last night where the happy hour price on a glass of wine was $15.
Uh-huh.
I feel like
Uh-huh.
building a house for $13 more is a pretty good deal.
I agree. So yeah, I mean, I do think that this is a extremely important piece of writing. I think that Thoreau, and maybe that's my biggest surprise right
Yeah, I
there.
know. I thought about that too. That's a good one.
Right,
Yeah.
like
And by the way, I'm going to keep calling him Thoreau because I don't want everybody correcting me, even though I'm pretty sure I'm
it's
right.
it's kind of like Van Gogh.
Van Gogh. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
definitely.
yeah.
Or Coupe de Grace. Sorry,
Coupe de
coup de
grace.
grace. Like I've been corrected on that so many times that now I just say coup de grace because I don't want people correct, even though I know coup de grace is correct. Anyway, these are the other one that always gets me is bruschetta.
Bruschetta.
I've ordered bruschetta, and the people will be like, "You mean bruschetta?" And I'm like, "Yeah, fine, bruschetta, whatever." You know,
It's
or
like
if you order chicken in an Italian restaurant and you say pollo, and they're like pollo, and I'm like, "It's definitely not pollo in Italian, but fine, whatever, pollo." So
it's
anyway,
kind of like ordering a venti versus no, I want a large.
yeah, I say large. I'm not cowing under to Starbucks. So we are certifying this, I believe.
I think we are.
It's unanimous. So thanks for joining us on Toasting the Classics. This is now Walden is now a classic in our canon. Thanks for joining us and peace out, everybody. Bye.
Thanks for having me.